YouTube above average code here. In case you missed it, 343 actually released recommended competitive settings for Halo Infinite here the other day. 2 years into the game, something very, very helpful that nearly all players have been hunting for on YouTube, on Reddit. 343 has finally given insight from their competitive insights team into basically what you should be running for settings, basically from graphic settings to some controller settings to basically help you optimize your game and set you on the right path to being more successful in the competitive aspect of Halo Infinite. I can't believe they're just now releasing this. It feels extremely late, but we're going to go through everything in this post, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts, some things I agree with, some things I disagree with, and then there's a few told you so moments from you guys here in my community. So let's dive right in. Right at the top here, guys, there is a really great section about what you are kind of looking for in your PC, your build specifically, to kind of be able to run on low, medium, high, or ultra graphic settings. While I'm not going to dive too deep into this, I just had some chats today in the live stream of somebody asking for this, so I highly recommend you guys go to this chart if you're building a PC or considering upgrading your PC so that you can kind of get more frames or better performance here in Halo Infinite. Now, we're going to dive right into the specific settings, guys. We're going to start with controller/mouse and keyboard. Vibration, obviously, disabled. This teaches you to better use visual and sound cues in a competitive environment as opposed to relying on your controller vibration, which is kind of why they discuss. Personally, I just hate vibration in controllers. I feel like it's weird and it doesn't really give me anything except, like, I guess, like, a more, like, intimate, like, feeling while I'm playing the game. That sounds naughty, but you guys know what I mean. I hope you know what I mean. Anyways, more nitty-gritty stuff. Hold to crouch enabled. I've talked about this a lot, guys. It is much less button presses to just hold down to crouch and then let go, as opposed to toggling it where you have to press it once to go down and once to go up. This also makes it very easy to crouch strafe and things like that. Hold to zoom disabled. Now, this is one where I do the opposite. However, so most people just, when they get shot, they just let themselves get knocked out of the scope and they find it easier just to push the left trigger back in. But personally, I just go in and out while toggling it, so I have hold to zoom enabled. But this, to me, is kind of personal preference. I've always played with hold to zoom, but I know many pros do hold to zoom disabled so that they just tap it to go back into the scope. Hold to sprint disabled, just tap it once and you just keep sprinting, so you don't have to press your left stick in or whatever you use to sprint constantly. Movement assisted steering disabled. Maintain sprint enabled. This helps you with a lot of skill jumps like the pizza jump. So when you jump and hit the ledge, you keep your sprint and just keep going. As opposed to having to press the stick again to restart that sprint. Auto clamber disabled. I just keep this off because it's easier to, like, cancel if you're, like, checking up above a ledge or something, like if you're jumping top glass on recharge or something like that. And then step jump enabled, so you're not always jumping the max height. If you don't know what step jump is, it kind of, if you're jumping onto a lower ledge, you're not always jumping the max height. Your Spartan will do a shorter jump as high as it needs to get onto that ledge. This saves a lot of time being in the air and things like that. There is CIT, Competitive Insights Team commentary for each of these settings as well, guys. They make it very clear here. All sensitivity settings, controller layouts, mouse and keyboard binds are very subjective. So they do not go over that in this post because it's mainly personal preference. But there are a ton of videos here on the channel, one linked down below, about all sensitivity things. Not just showing you guys my sensitivity, but showing, kind of leading you guys down the right path so that you can find what's comfortable for you. Now, going into video settings, guys, they go over FOV. They recommend starting at 100 as a good field of view. I personally run 97. 100 is a great place to start because it's kind of the middle ground between high FOV being 120 and down below being around in, like, I think 68's the lowest you can go. So starting at 100, you can kind of get a feel for it. Again, field of view. Everything is the same. However, proportionately, a higher FOV, which you see in the image on the right here, things will appear further away, but you can see more of the screen, a higher field of view. And then if you have a lower value, you will see less of the screen, but things will appear closer. This will also gauge your reticle. Your reticle will scale either bigger or smaller. Smaller at higher FOV, bigger at the lower FOV. So start at 100, go from there, and see what's comfortable. It even says this field of view is a great starting point. Adjust accordingly. Not much in depth there, but there's only so much you can say. FOV is very, very personal preference, and your playstyle can greatly affect which FOV you're going to prefer as well. Now, guys, this stuff is this is what you should have had since the beginning of the game if you prefer competitive. Blur, 0%. Screen shake, 0%. Exposure, 0%. Full screen effects, 0%. Speed lines, disabled. Sharpening, 60%. Now, it even says here, this basically just gives you a heightened sense of immersion to kind of make it feel like you're more like you're actually a Spartan running around trying to kill enemies. However, in a competitive setting, you don't want these things that can kind of cause like extra noise and take away your focus from what's actually going on. Speed lines are a perfect example here. When you're in a competitive setting, you're very locked in. You want to see every little thing going on, especially if it's an enemy, a thrown grenade, even maybe overshield dropping on the ground. When you're sprinting, there are little like lines that go past your head, and they can be very distracting. They can make you, if you're like really locked in, they can throw you off. So that's why most of these effects are just turned off altogether. Brightness, adjust to your preference. I can't believe they even put a recommended brightness section, but they did do a good job of covering everything here. And now they do go over the graphics settings here. On PC, res scale 100, minimum frame rate 120, and maximum frame rate unlimited. This is one that is a told you so moment for me. So I always went unlimited on my max frame rate, but everybody's like, cap your frames. Why are you letting it go crazy? Frame fluctuation can affect the game negatively. Why do you have that on? The Competitive Insights team literally recommends an unlimited frame rate. This is because on certain maps, you may be able to get a higher frame rate than what you're actually capping yourself at. Now, I understand that there's a bunch of pros and cons. Everybody likes to argue this, but for Halo Infinite specifically, the Competitive Insights team from 343 literally get a say in how this game is designed. They recommend the max frame rate unlimited. I'll probably just keep mine capped at 170 because that's what I'm used to, but they recommend unlimited. Now, the minimum frame rate set to 120. This is assuming you have a system that can get to 120. When you set your minimum frame rate that high, the system is going to do everything it can to keep your game at 120 frames, right? It does not want it to go below. This can be good, but also bad. If your system can't get to 120, it may kind of make your system bottlenecked a little bit trying to get it to 120, so just keep that in mind. And then res scale 100, I actually run lower than that so that I can get a little bit more frames, but they do recommend 100%, so I may try running that a little bit higher. The Halo support note, when setting the minimum frame rate to 120, the game will prioritize maintaining 120 FPS and deprioritize its resolution. In other words, the resolution may drop to a point that it appears blurry or fuzzy during demanding gameplay. If this is occurring, you may want to select a lower minimum frame rate value. And I want to read this section because it describes it much better. This is what I mean by if your system cannot get to 120 frames, it may not be a positive thing setting to 120 frames. VSync disabled. This is generally the way to go anytime you're playing in a competitive setting. Disabling VSync may result in the image appearing to tear or split during gameplay because that's basically what VSync is there for, to prevent that. Enabling VSync may result in a hit to the game's peak and average frame rate, but instances of the image splitting will be significantly reduced. So this is one of those things that can make the game graphically pleasing, but it can make the game run a little bit worse and have you have slightly less frames than you would actually want. And remember, guys, frames win games. You want as many frames as you can get in most cases. And one thing I want to say before I keep going, guys, if you're at 30 frames or 60 frames, your goal should be 120. The jump to 120 frames is so massive, especially in a competitive environment. However, if you're already at 120, even a little past, the jump from 120 to even like 170 where I'm at or 240 is much smaller. Yes, it helps at like higher like competitive environments, but just remember, it's not going to have a severe change on your gameplay. If you're at least at 120, you are at a very comfortable frame rate, so you don't necessarily have to go too crazy and break the bank unless your situation allows you to get to that 240 frames. Now, quality preset low, effects quality medium, animation quality max, and then simulation quality ultra. This is a really good thing to follow because this basically make sure your graphic settings are high on what matters in terms of, finding where your enemy is, taking in important things on the map and things like that. but the things that make the game more aesthetically pleasing are lower or even medium. Personally, I just set everything on low and it doesn't really bug me, but I may actually take these tips and set these two to max and ultra to kind of see how much it may help. And the commentary here is setting your graphics quality preset to low will give your machine the highest performance capabilities. However, there are 3 adjustments within graphics that are recommended to fine-tune your performance. So basically, stuff that doesn't matter, they put it on the lower end. Stuff that does matter, you put it on the higher end so that you're getting things that are important in the graphics areas, but you're taking away the stuff that's not as important so that your system can still run at the highest it can. Async compute. This one I really don't understand, but basically if your PC's performance is not bound by its CPU, enabling async compute may reduce your GPU overhead and result in higher performance. If your PC's performance is bound by its CPU, enabling async compute will likely result in lower performance. So this is going to depend on your build, where you're kind of bottlenecking, or if you just have endless amounts of kind of like area to work with, then that's going to depend on whether you have async compute on or off. Now, Xbox consoles, this one's for all you Xbox users here. Again, target frame rate, 60 or 120. Our recommendation is to set your target frame rate to the highest possible value. For most players, it will be 60. However, your Xbox Series X or S has the ability to play on 120 FPS refresh rate. Again, it depends on your system, but your goal is going to be 60 or 120, depending on what you are able to get to. And then again, there is more information with 120 hertz refresh rate on Xbox X or S, and then you can go to how to enable graphics quality mode for Halo. Now, audio, guys, 10, 5, 0, 10, 0, 10, right? Hit detection and sound effects you want on. You want these on so that you can hear the important stuff like getting hit with bullets, or if you're hitting bullets, things like that. However, environmental effects and any music, I always turn off music. That's like the first thing I shut off on the game. It is pointless. It is useless. It does not have any point if you're just getting on to play competitive, so turn those off. And then main 10, voice 5. And I don't really play with this too much because I have a mix amp, and I believe they even mention mix amps here. So basically, I have 2 dials up on the front of my desk where I just adjust the volume of everything, basically. So that's where I mostly play with it. But again, if you don't have this, this is basically where they suggest starting with your audio. Dynamic, we have found dynamic mode to be clearer and more thorough than compressed mode. Basically, you'll hear things more evenly as opposed to compressed, which makes it nearly impossible to hear footsteps ever since they adjusted it. Now, this is my second monster told you so moment for some of you out there. Spartan chatter enabled, personal AI chatter enabled. So many people have asked me why I have Spartan chatter on. Why do you have Spartan chatter on? I turn that off. It's annoying. You should keep these 2 boxes checked, as the Spartan chatter can occasionally give you the enemy's player location. Also, personal AI chatter will deliver small amounts of information, especially around objectives. This is huge. For a while, I even ran subtitles because if I couldn't hear properly, or maybe my teammates were being a little too loud, I could see the subtitles. Sometimes your AI or the Spartan will literally give you locations or things going on, even like power-ups coming up. So if you're not looking around the map and paying attention, you can get those audio cues literally from in-game to literally help you. It is very important to have these on. I like having them on. I do have them turned down a little bit because they can be pretty loud. I think that's why the voice is down to 5 up here, because it can be annoying, but it is also helpful. So there is a place to have that on. And now gameplay, scoreboard, hold and release. It's less button presses, checking the score, see how many are alive, or just basically to see how you're doing at the end of the game. Enable your FPS counter and network stats. You should always have these on so you can see how your game's running. Obviously, we like to check our ping to see if bullets aren't registering, if it is the ping, or if we're just going crazy. And you can also figure out which pings run better or worse depending on what's going on in-game, and you can see if you have like packet loss and things like that, guys. Now, UI color, they recommend red, purple, green, or yellow for your enemies. Obviously, make your outline as thick and visual as you can. Set them to 1 and 2. Thicker reticle, easier to see. These colors are the ones they recommend. Very straightforward. Don't have to go too deep into that. Obviously, you want all names on, and you want it to display gamer tags. As you get to higher levels, you'll hear the pros and comms. They'll call out. They'll be like, oh, Lucid back A or something like that. They'll call out names so that if your teammate gets a kill or spots somebody, they know if it was the one that was being called out. It's just a better way to kind of put names to people so you can easier keep track of where enemies are on the map. Chromatic, aberration disabled, bloom disabled, parallax disabled. Again, I think these are just more like immersive things in the game that do not need to be on. Text size default are large. There isn't a right answer here to what is better. Exactly, it is whichever you prefer. And then they go over these again right at the end: blur, screen shake, exposure. Oh God, exposure. Basically turn those off, stuff that does not matter and can distract you in game. But guys, that covers literally everything from the competitive insights team at 343 and what they recommend for controller settings, or gameplay settings, I should say. There weren't really specific controller settings here, but we have a ton of videos on the channel. Again, link down below. Check that out if you're looking for controller settings. But they covered a lot of other very important settings in terms of gameplay. Again, they have everything in terms of system capabilities and what you should be going for depending on what you want to run in your game here on Halo Infinite. But alrighty, guys, that covers everything. Give me all your thoughts down below, whether you like these settings, are you running these settings, or do you think 343 is insane for releasing these so late? Because honestly, I kind of do. People would have found this really helpful a long time ago. But alrighty, guys, that covers it. This was just released this past week. Subscribe to the channel. Halo Infinite content. We've been playing some Call of Duty. Getting really excited for Modern Warfare 3 rank, guys, on the live streams. So hit that sub button. Leave a like on the video. Already mentioned, leave me a comment. And then finally, channel memberships. Super thanks. Helps me out a lot as a content creator, but please do not feel like you have to. But alright, guys, thank you so much for all the support lately. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay tuned for the next video.